All right, we're continuing our little series of oral history interviews, and today we're going to talk to Lorraine Shreffler, who has a great history at Pozo Park and the Posey area. And we're in her home today on Camp Drive in Posey, California. And she and her family, the Dunn family, I believe, owned the cabin across from the McKnights, she and Vern Shreffler, and it's currently owned by Kevin Russell and his wife Roxy. So, Lorraine, first of all, thank you for doing this interview, and tell us a little bit about your family history and when your family arrived in Pozo Park.
Well, my aunt and uncle, the Klingenbergs, had the property before my parents did, and at that time we were on Breckenridge Mountain during the summers with an aunt and uncle, and the winters before I started school I was up on Breckenridge. And then when my uncle sold the ranch, my parents asked my uncle if he would like to sell the property. That was in the early 40s, and so we did.
Okay, tell us a little bit about your parents. What were their names?
Jim and Helen, or James, and they were living in Bakersfield, and that's where all of us were born, was in Bakersfield. My dad came from Missouri, and my mother from Kansas.
Okay, now tell us, when did Vern arrive at Pozo Park? And I bet you had something to do with him coming up to Pozo Park.
Yes, I did. Well, his parents started going to Jack Ranch way back. I don't know the dates, but they had a cabin down on the creek, and his brother played drums there when he was 8 or 9 years old in Saturday night dances, and that's where I met Vernon. I was living with the summer with Marge and Claude Hackett at the minefield. I'd spent several summers. The first year I was with them, Beverly was just a tiny baby, and I took care of her, and her brother was 3 or 4.
Well, where is the mine located that Marge and Claude worked at and you helped?
Well, they just called it the minefield, but you turn off there just above Jack Ranch, and you go back in where I'm not sure what they call that subdivision.
Okay.
And then it was on up on the hill. It was a tungsten mine. There were actually 2 or 3 of them at one time, and they were shut down after the war because the tungsten wasn't needed as much, and they just became, overgrown and a pit.
Okay. Now, tell us, when did you and Vern get married, and when did you take up residence in your family's place?
Well, we got married in 1950. We were just finishing up high school, and we bought the property from my parents in 1960. And then we had already started spending a lot of time there. Vernon was repairing. It was just one room with when my parents bought it, it was one room with a sleeping porch. And later my dad closed in or added on a story and a half, which was the front room and an upstairs bedroom. And then when Vernon and I bought it, he turned the sleeping porch into the kitchen and the old kitchen into a bedroom.
Okay.
Nothing was lined for many years. We'd watch the snakes and the lizards roam in and out through the cracks in the walls. And all of the lumber that my dad put into the addition he added, came from the old mill way up on
Sugarloaf?
No, further up.
Further up,
Way
okay.
up. Can't remember the name of the mill, but it was there for many, many years, and they sold off the old houses.
Now, you know, there are a number of people that I think could very readily say we could give them a title of Mr. Pozo Park, including Mr. Conklin and, of course, Mother and Dad Simons, and even Howard and Sylvia Weeks, in my opinion. But Vernon certainly could use that title, in my opinion, because he took care of Pozo Park for many, many years. Tell us a little bit about what he did.
Well, when it got harder for Claude to help the people out, Vernon started doing a lot of work down there to help people. He put in septics, he repaired septics. I teased him and called him the sewer man. And he would get up in the middle of the night if somebody called and said they had a water break or something go wrong. He was always willing to go up and fix it, and he just enjoyed doing it for people. He had stopped working in Bakersfield and was cutting firewood and just doing whatever he could to work, because he just was the kind of person who had to work.
Well, he was a great guy, and I don't know how Pozo Park could have gotten along without him, I'll tell you that. He was a terrific guy.
Well, he did a lot more for Pozo Park than most anybody I'd ever know.
Right, putting in the water systems and connecting up the springs and so on and so on.
He was also a talented musician, which a lot of people never knew, because when he got so busy with working at the Golden Bear and cutting firewood and raising a family, he put his music away.
What did he play?
He played clarinet and saxophone. When he was 9 years old, he played with the Kern Philharmonic.
I'll be darned.
For a season.
I had no idea.
Yeah, he played in a little jazz band, and he was 13 or 14. Went around to a lot of places with the group. And he was first chair at Standard Junior High and their band, and first chair in Kern High School.
Oh, well, he was a talent then.
Yeah.
Well, tell me something, Lorraine. With all these years that you've been up in Posey and Pozo Park, there must have been some times that there were some real adventures. Can you recall any incidents, interesting incidents that might have occurred?
Quite a few.
Well, let's hear about them.
They may not be in chronological order.
That's all right.
I can
That's all right.
Well, when I was little, my grandmother was with us first. They had moved her cabin, which was 2 rooms, over from Breckenridge Mountain, and that is the second little cabin that's down there on the property by the road. My cousin had it later, and he added on with lumber also from, I think it was called the Box Mill or something like that.
Okay.
They're way up past Sugarloaf, up on top. And then we had no electricity at the time. My grandmother was Russian-born German. Her family had migrated from Germany to Russia at the time she was born, and then from there to Pennsylvania. I think it was Pennsylvania. And her name was Klingenberg. And she spoke good English, but she still had the German accent very strong. And when things would not go quite right, we would know, because all of a sudden we would hear this rash of German coming, and we'd have to run in, find out what the disaster was. And I remember one time the bread bowl flying out the door because it wouldn't raise or something that made her mad. Most of the time she was pretty congenial. And we had no icebox or refrigerator, since we had no electricity. And we had an icebox and we had a cooler. which I'm not sure too many people know what the coolers are.
Yep.
And one time she opened it up and there was a skunk inside of it.
Oh.
And yes, we had a lot of skunks. And she was fit to be tied, didn't know what to do. And we decided that the only way to get rid of it is leave the door to the inside part of the shut and go around and try to take the board off the back. And we did that rather quickly and ran off. I was only about 10, and Faye was 12, and the other kids were younger. And he did leave, but she didn't want to use it after that.
He didn't leave a stink.
No, he never sprayed.
Oh, that's quite a deal.
And yeah, skunks were something else up there. I'm sure your mom had a problem with them too. I know one time there was one had gotten in Bernard's house, and they called Vern to see what he could do to get it out, and he just told them to leave the door open and it would leave, which it did. It didn't spray, but another time, one got in the wood box of the other cabin on the hill, my grandma's cabin, and we had a friend renting it, and she called Patrick to come see what he could do. He shot it.
Oh, gosh.
And it did smell.
That was a mistake.
That was a mistake. So, and then another time there was one in Axe's stove. Why they like to get in the stove is beyond me. And I told him, you cannot shoot it. You cannot shoot it in the house. And it ended up, he shot it.
Uh-oh.
So,
Same result?
Same result.
Yeah.
So that's just one series of things with the skunks. And we used to, we would walk down to Jack Ranch for the dances. And that was a little later. Well, going back to when my grandmother was there, she would send us up to Mr. Stegeman's to go get eggs and fresh vegetables. And we would walk up there, and he always was there, and we would tell him what she needed, and he'd load it up, and we'd carry it back down to the cabin. And then Mr. Eiler had the cabin where Wayne and Janine are.
Campbell.
Yeah, where Campbell's are. He brought her fresh meat, and I'm sure it was venison. And so we were well supplied besides what my parents brought every week. And there was a potluck almost every night. Jack Ranch would have it one night, Balance Rock on Wednesday nights, and we square danced afterwards. And Sugarloaf on another night. So Dad would bring a big gunny sack full of fresh corn on the weekends. So every time we went to the potluck, Grandma cooked corn, ears of corn to take. And we had an old Willys. And she didn't drive, but my older sister, Ruthie, drove. And then when my grandmother passed away, my sister Ruthie was the one who was always there with us. She was quite a bit older than I.
Well, those are quite the experiences, and I'm sure everybody's going to appreciate learning how life was back then with coolers instead of ice boxes and refrigerators and so on.
Well, we were thrilled when they brought the electricity in.
And what year was that? Do you remember?
I think it was 47 or 48. I'm not positive, but I think it was right around 47 or 48. And at that time, the crew stayed mostly at Balance Rock. And they would work during the week, and then they would be at the dances on Saturday night. And they would get pretty high with beer. And we would get up when we'd hear the noise. We'd go out and watch as they usually ended up with fights.
Oh, gosh.
And one innocent bystander, young fellow whose dad worked for many, many years at Floyd's, he was knocked out just by standing too close. And one guy ducked and he got it.
Now, this was down at Balance Rock.
This is Balance Rock.
Yeah.
And but they were stringing the wires through the trees at that time. And it wasn't until much later, after we had that terrible wind, I think it was 77, I think.
Oh, yeah. Well, out in...
Because I was teaching in Glenville.
Right. I think that was 77, the winter,
Yeah.
December of 77.
Yeah, it was in December. And we were without power for 2 weeks, pretty close to 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And they were trying to find all the breaks, so every once in a while they would throw a heavy charge through the lines, and wherever they saw the sparks, they knew that's where the breaks were. And I cooked a huge big pot of beans, and it was clear up till Christmas Eve. It was either Christmas, I know it was Christmas Eve. So they could come, and we had a big thing of coffee. They could come in and out and warm up, have beans and coffee. And they said, we've got one more break, and we're not sure where it is, so we're really going to hit the line. And we all went out to kind of watch to see if we could help them pick it out, and it turned out it was right outside our house.
Oh,
Scared us when it blew, because sparks flew everywhere. And,
well, that's quite something.
so
Now, Lorraine, tell me, do you have any remembrances of any of the old-timers there, the people in the park?
Many remembrances.
Tell us about a couple of them, if you would.
Well, there's Mr. Conklin. Of course, your dad, what a wonderful person he was. And your mom, I adored them both. And
Felix and Elsie Lundquist.
Felix and Elsie, yeah. And Mr. Conklin, he was so educated and so interesting. He knew so much about so many things.
Mm-hmm.
And his history is just absolutely amazing. From being a page at the White House when he was young. His grandfather was one of the signers of the Constitution. And he fought in the war of the First World War. And I think he might have been the one in Spanish American and not his dad, but I won't swear to that. But he tried, when World War II started, he tried to go back and join. And they told him, no, you're too old. I think he said he was in his 60s at that time. So instead, he went to work for Lockheed, building planes, until the war was over, and then came back to his little place.